All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Langford. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the Beaverton School District. And Luke Neff from Newberg and Mark are here with me as well for this session. And we're calling this Reality Reset. So rethinking time and possibility, leadership lessons learned from the pandemic. So we're going to jump right in if I can get my slides going here. And really what we're thinking about for this time, and want you all to be thinking about as well, is that the pandemic, no matter what your role is in a district, it forced us to rethink how we do our work. And the speed of which we do our work, the scale of which we do our work, we all had to kind of reset our realities. And we had them reset in some instances. And what we don't want to do is snap back to the old way of doing our work, the old way of teaching and learning, because if we do, we're going to lose some really important lessons in here. So no matter your role in a district, we want you to be thinking about how your reality shifted and what we can learn from it. And so we're all three of us are going to share some brief examples, and then we want to make this interactive, and we want you to share with us as well, so that just like in the spirit of ACPE, if we were all in the room together, we would be able to take advantage of everyone's knowledge and experience. So welcome. That's going to be the work for the next hour or so. We're going to try and get done about 12:15 just so that we can prepare for our lunch session. That's going to be a very important session because we're going to be sharing our scholarship winners. And so we want to give you all time to go grab some lunch and then get back so that we can share that great work of the scholarship committee. So with that, before we start, I want you all to think about these two questions and use the chat if you have ideas, or just hold them in your mind and we'll make space, like I said, at the end of the session. But how did the events of this last year reshape your ideas of what is possible? And what can we learn as we go forward from this last year? So those are two important, essential questions for the next hour. And with that, I'm going to ask my good friend, Mark, to share how his reality and Highline's reality was reset.
Well, thank you, Steve. I think everybody here actually went through similar things, so I may repeat a number of things, but I want to start by saying Highline was actually lucky enough to be in the know before a lot of things started to happen. Back in late February, we were starting to have conversations with OSBI and with the governor's office where they were talking about a pending closure. So we had been spending time thinking about what we needed to do. And then on March 13th, boom, we closed our doors. Well, we had deployed nearly 12,000 devices that week and the next week. And, that was the new reality. And the new reality was we're sending home kids with devices. The other reality was they don't have internet. And so we started looking at what we had. I was part of Sprint 1 million, and so I had a bunch of hotspots that came from Sprint 1 million. And then we had the T-Mobile. We went and bought a bunch of devices for T-Mobile to be able to meet the needs. But honestly, it came down to practice. My staff, this happens to be one of my technicians out in the school, and he has just been like the model for us in our district and for other districts in many ways. He was Johnny on the spot. He was always there to answer questions. He speaks 2 languages. I actually think he speaks 3, and he's able to communicate with the families. And so they were coming in to get devices, and he was walking them through the process. Why don't you move to the next slide? But I think the hardest part was, we reset and we moved the school offline. We actually no longer have a had a building. We were not working from the schools. So, you and I think of it as being online, but we were taking the schools offline. And so we ended up opening up a email and telephone support line that operated for 16 hours a day. And that was primarily done by IT staff with a few others from administration. And we realized that we also didn't have the teachers fully bolstered up for their ability to work from home. They had laptops, but they needed a second screen in some cases. They didn't have the right tables. They didn't have lighting. They needed to know how to use the tools. So we spent some time basically training our staff and getting a tool set fully identified to be able to be used. See at the next one. And I'm going through these rather quickly because if I go through these, you're going to hear the concepts coming out of Luke and out of Steve and the relationships, but we really want to hear from you in the background as well. So our leadership challenge, though, that came out of this paradigm shift was we have new instruction. That new instruction is no longer face-to-face. That new instruction is now, I'm sitting in front of a camera. I'm trying to teach my students. We sent home document cameras with teachers so that they could actually still use the tools that they were used to in their classroom. But then we launched new tools inside the system, like Jamboard and others that they could use. The communication model, man, did that change. I mean, we had comms going out every single day to families, comms going out every single day to staff. And so our communications team was really, really stepping up their communication and making sure that people knew what to do. And as I mentioned before, the support aspect changed because now the teacher can't call for tech support to go help in the classroom. It's the parent calling for tech support to say, my kid can't log on. Something's not working right. And so we had to adjust and work on that. Our family involvement became a new level. They were not distant, but they started to drift back in because now they were in many ways for the PK through the 8th grade really integrated into that students' learning now. They were logging onto computers. They were sitting beside their child during class. They had interactions with their teachers during the day. And we had to then embrace that. We had to come at it from a leadership perspective of this is what we want. We want that engagement, but we also need to keep that engagement in line with what we're doing as a educational organization. And now online meant everything. I mean, everything is managed by IT. It became this model of we had to keep the things available. We actually went to a 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. log on all of our devices because we had students who were working to help pay for their rent and food. And so, their hard work, our hard work, all the long hours that we did, and then age really impacted the way that district and families communicated. We found that a lot of our seasoned teachers were not prepared for this. They didn't know how to teach in a remote world. And we also found out that younger teachers weren't prepared for that because they've been taught how to work with their students face to face, not necessarily from a remote aspect. So we had to work on that. Okay, Steve. So, our reset was that 16 hours, teachers bolstered, 6,000 families without internet access, and then online tools and training. Go ahead and go to the next one, Steve. You're going the wrong direction. There we go. And we brought up the future. And the future is, like many others, we're starting Highline Virtual Academy. And Highline Virtual Academy will be for those students who the parents and the student have chosen that, you know, being at school, being in a brick and mortar environment is not their environment. It is online. And, you know, we've had that in the past with students who really wanted to be in these smaller schools, fewer students, to have the capacity to be able to spend time um, in small groups. Well, now with the Highline Virtual Academy, that's really going to come into play. But I think the harder thing is we've had to deal with therapy and help desk and tutoring. And so we put now into plans for the future. And therapy is really related to SEL approaches. You know, we have so many things happening online and students who are interacting and actually looking at inappropriate material that we need to have professionals who can spend time with them. Our help desk, we don't have a traditional help desk anymore. And so it's changed the way that our mindset is about that. And we're actually going to be engaging other departments in the development of a help desk that is family centric. And then our tutoring, we have a package online that we use for tutoring, and the students are able to get help with whatever they're using. It's called Paper, and they can log in and they can get support with mathematics, English, sciences, and it's really 24/7. But I think the other future impact is our equipment is changing. You know, is the Chromebook the right tool? Is an iPad the right tool? Is a laptop the right tool? Is it a tablet with pen and writing? And how do we develop or use the right tools? And in fact, those tools that we're purchasing, you know, a Chromebook, I have everything. I have iPads, Chromebooks, Windows, Mac, we have Android. Those multiple tools are not robust. And in an environment where you're asking the students to use multiple scenarios, to be logging into 3 or 4 different applications, using video, those tools just didn't perform at the right level. And that's where we're trying to address as well. And then really for the other thing is our timing of work has to change. We used to have summers. I imagine that you feel the same way. There's no more summers for us. We are online now 24/7, 365, and we have school basically going 24/7, 365. So uh, when we used to do things, we can't do them now. So we have to schedule, and we have to look at calendars, and we have to look at all the different aspects that are happening across the district before we do our work. And then that work is often complicated by another department and their approaches. That could be teaching and learning. It could be coming from our scheduling department. I mean, there are so many different things that can impact our work. I think that's it for me, Steve. Uh, I guess there's 2 more slides here. The leadership lesson that I did learn. Planning is needed, but that comes with an understanding that your plan will not be executed in the manner that you expect or to the degree of success that was outlined in your plan. It is inevitable that you will deal with change. That was one of the biggest things that I think I pulled down. I can plan, but I know that something's going to derail that plan. And so we will do our best to be prepared, but change will be inevitable. And then the next slide, connectivity, applications, devices, environment, and support. Our families and staff need our best work in future adoptions. That means internet connectivity, data privacy, and staff preparedness. And I'm looking at all the different ways. In fact, I had a great conversation with some peers just this week about the future of wireless communication and what companies think we should be doing instead of what we think we should be doing. I mean, we're looking at putting in a LTE network. And I'm hearing maybe that's not the best. Maybe we should be looking at some satellite options and other things like that. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Luke. Luke, take it away.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so many similarities in Newberg schools. Start with a quote from Andy Bernard. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. That was kind of the feeling for me looking back on this last year. Like, we had this kind of amazing thing going, and then the pandemic hit, and I don't think we even realized how good it was at that point. You know, we were obviously always, you know, scrambling to try to make things as good as we could, but had no idea how nice that was compared to what was coming. So Newberg's a little smaller than Highline, and we have about 5,000 students, or at least we did pre-pandemic. We have a tech department of 4.5. I count myself as the 0.5. So my title is Director of Strategic Partnerships. So I do a bunch of things that Joe Morlock throws my way on the side, and then I get to do some tech department things as well. So kind of split my time there. One device per student. We were at one device per student. We had a cart-based model going, and we had these kind of ancient iPads that we bought with a bond, and they were kind of hanging on for dear life right at the start of the pandemic. So that was a little bit of a dilemma to solve. But then we had Chromebooks for all of 3 through 12, and those turned out to be kind of the right device to send home. We also had a pretty good ecosystem going between Clever, Google Classroom, and Seesaw. That was, you know, pretty huge in terms of just being able to pivot really easily to a digital online setup. So kind of thinking back through, you know, this whole reality, you know, my really solid advice to everyone is just have an amazing team already in place. It makes it super easy to handle a pandemic if you have a Jamie McParland and a Tony Earlbeck and a Ken Cohn and a Shafraz Khalil. Like, it doesn't get much easier than that. So, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. There are a whole bunch of trees that you know, were planted 10 years ago by Jamie, or 5 years ago with Tony setting up some things that we had no idea just how important they would be for when our reality was reset. Okay, so before we go to the next slide, take a look at the Newberg School District office right there. It's beautiful. Some green grass, blue sky, some nice light coming in from the side, excuse me. And then let's change the slide to the next one and look at, yeah, here we go. So this is the Newberg School District office, you know, right about the time that we were trying to launch our online school year. So when Tara yesterday said, you know, something about how we've been through hell, I felt that in a very literal, okay, maybe not literal, I'm a recovering English teacher, in a very like palpable way, like ash in your mouth, kind of, you know, remembering back to how my mouth tasted like a campfire for a while there. You know, we had this pandemic happen. We had a summer with some time to prep for it, but then we had forest fires hit as well. And so I have these really vivid memories of working from home, trying to launch an online school year during a pandemic next to a forest fire. And for me, where I live at my house, like literally there's a big mountain behind our house and it was on fire. And so I would be typing an email furiously, go run out and look at the mountain to see if the fire started coming back down the mountain at us, you know, run back and set up an iPad, and then, you know, check the evacuation orders to see if it was time to get the go bag and the family and go. So that made for a less than ideal way to launch an online school year, for sure. That was not optimal at all. But in the midst of all that, I was reminded of a story, and it's a story from like, I think the 1800s. And it was from, there were some British soldiers stationed in India in the 1800s, probably doing their imperialism thing. And they got bored, they had time, and so they set up a golf course in the middle of the jungle, and just to have something to do to spend their time. So they built this golf course, and they tried it out, and right away they realized this issue, which was that the monkeys would come down out of the jungle and would run out onto the golf course that they had made, and they would grab the golf balls. And I don't know if the monkeys thought that they were fruit or something, maybe, but they'd like maybe try to bite them and then realize it's not actually fruit. And so they'd throw the golf balls. And so these soldiers got pretty frustrated with this. And then eventually they decided they just had to, embrace the chaos that the monkeys brought. And so they made a course rule, which was you have to play the ball where the monkey throws it. You have to play the ball where the monkey throws it. And that kind of was like the perfect metaphor for me with this last year. There were monkeys, metaphorically, on the golf course, and they were throwing golf balls all over the place. And sometimes they threw them in a way that really was terrible, deep into the weeds, and we had to go after them, and there were snakes, and it was crazy. But sometimes they actually threw the ball in a way that got it closer to the green and made it easier in some ways. So even though we had a lot of things we had to adapt to and try to work through that were tough, there were some wins. There were some ways that got us closer to the green. There were, quite honestly, a few of our staff who kind of looked at what was coming with this online school year and realized that was not for them and made some choices to change what they do. And while I try to have a Ted Lasso style belief in everyone that they can change and grow and become the best version of themselves in a growth mindset, I think for some of our staff that looked at the school year and decided to retire, like that helped us in some ways. And maybe the monkeys throwing their golf balls helped us out a little bit. One of the ways that was hardest, though, there were some ways that was good for sure, but one of the ways that was hardest for us was kind of what Mark mentioned also, just some really big connectivity challenges. So Steve, if you go to the next slide, one of the questions that we kind of worked through or talked about or tried to include in this presentation was around this question of, how did you work with stakeholders, IT, schools, departments, parents, community? And this is just one example of where my kind of split role, where I do some tech work, but also do this strategic partnership thing, really came together in a cool way, which was we ended up working with the city of Newberg and getting them to fund our hotspot deployment. We needed, in the end, about 800 hotspots. We kind of kept ordering batches and batches and batches. I think for like maybe every week there for a couple months, Tony and I were working out how many more hotspots do we need to order this week. But what ended up happening, which was just this really great success story about how important it is to bring the community together and work together on things, was that in talking to the city of Newberg, we realized they had coronavirus relief funds. They had quite a bit of those. They didn't have a great plan for how to spend them. And as soon as we were able to approach it in terms of something that mattered a lot to them, which was workforce development and being able to maintain a workforce, we had all these parents who were stuck at home because their kids were stuck at home. As soon as we were able to frame it around that, they got on board with this idea that they should put some of their funds towards these hotspots. And they ended up funding, I think, almost all of our hotspots for the allowable time that the coronavirus relief funds could be released for. So that was a big win. We ended up getting out 4,400 Chromebooks. That was basically one per kid. 800 hotspots in the end for our district of around, 5,000 before pandemic, but probably around 4,400 post-pandemic. And we had one charger that was chewed by a pet bunny, which, I had to include that because that is a just important data point for you all to consider. I think we can probably go on to the next slide at this point. The future impact that we're thinking through, how will Newberg be different in the future based upon the reality reset? So one of the ways that, the monkey threw the ball in the good direction was this permanent digital shift. We had a bunch of teachers who were really hesitant about getting on board with Google Classroom or Seesaw, and they were forced to, they had to. And then when we were getting set up for the school year and kind of getting out in buildings, working with principals, working through some things, we figured out that, okay, we've had these teachers who have spent a good chunk of the year getting everything online. What if some of the printers go missing? Would that be such a bad thing? They've gone a whole year without having to do printing. maybe if the printer's gone, that'll be okay. So we had a few printers go missing, and hopefully that will make some of this digital shift be permanent. Another big one I just have to shout out is that we were able to add a bilingual help desk position. Christian, I think you might be in the room right now. We are just so grateful that you joined the team, and I cannot imagine going forward without having a bilingual help desk position. It was definitely a strange experience, both hiring and onboarding in the middle of a pandemic, but it's just been critical, and we're super grateful that came together, and that's something we have to maintain for the future. That's just, I can't believe we weren't doing that before. Yesterday, Tara mentioned the permanent remote component. Yeah, we're thinking through that right now. How do we keep multiple options and online options as part of our way of just doing business now? And then what's that mean for home internet connectivity? How many hotspots do we have to keep deployed? What other options do we have? We're still figuring that out, but I think that Tara was spot on. We have to have a permanent remote component to what we offer our families now. The last one that I'll just throw out there as a dilemma is the free as in puppy idea. So I don't know how many of you got emails like this. The email line went something like, because there is a pandemic, get blank, insert the name of a fancy technology here, for free. And then there's the little asterisk behind it that's like, it's actually only free for the next 3 months. And then what's going to happen is every person who got that for free is going to want to keep it, and they're going to be banging on the door of the tech department, trying to get the tech department to fund it and keep it. So we're at a point now where, even though we tried to tamp some of that down, we have litters of these, free puppies, right? These technologies that our teachers have used and use well, and they're great, except that now we have a pretty cluttered ecosystem, and, different things that are doing the same thing, and that we can't afford going forward. So how do we clean up that mess? So that's one of the dilemmas we're kind of trying to work through right now. And I'd love to hear what others have to say on that one. I think, next slide, probably I could talk about just kind of the same idea. It's that, you have to play the ball where the monkey throws it idea. There's, Homer Simpson talking about the crisis-tunity. I think he says it's a Chinese word for opportunity is really the word for crisis and opportunity or something like that. I don't know if I believe Homer Simpson on that one, but either way, crisis-tunity, don't let a crisis-tunity go to waste. Don't miss the opportunities because you're so focused on the crisis. We had some good opportunities come along, and I think it has moved us forward in some ways that we wouldn't have been able to fast track or move forward on as quickly as we did. I think the last slide there, the big question on my mind is, how do we evolve from here in our relationship to technology? I think we have made great advancement in some ways really quickly. And also, I know just being at home with my own kids, in some ways, I think a lot of our kids and families have probably have some slightly unhealthy relationships with technology now. And how do we keep what's good, but also, kind of reset in ways that we need to reset? There's a quote, I think it's from Michael Pollan, who talks about, food and what's his quote? Something like, I think I have it here, so I can quote it exactly. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's pretty good advice for eating. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I wonder what the equivalent of that is for technology. How do we find that just enough amount where, our kids aren't doing all their learning through screens anymore, but there's a healthy balance, and how do we find that and promote that? That's my kind of dilemma I'm stuck with and need to do some future thinking on. All right, Steve, I think that's me and wrapped up, and it's on to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Luke. So I'll share a little bit about how our reality was reset. And then we're going to open it up because if you close your eyes and think about ACPE at the mountain, it's never just people talking to another group of people. The great strength of us is our community and the sharing that goes on. So I really want you to hold those questions in your mind about, how did your reality shift? What did you learn? How will things be different? Because we want the whole room to benefit from our collective thinking. So real quickly about Beaverton, you probably all know this because you lived it with us. it was mid-March, when things started really going off the rails with the pandemic. And we did in Beaverton probably what you all did too. We've had daily meetings around the pandemic and what we were going to do. And then all of a sudden, schools closed, and we had a day to tell 5,000 staff, go home and work, figure that out, and we'll help you. And 40,000 students that we're going to, take a long spring break, and we're going to figure this out when you get back. So that was our reality, is that we were in distance learning since April of last year. We just came back. April 19th was when our secondary students walked in the building. So it's been a long time for us, and probably you as well. And so our reality was shifted in so many ways during that time. And but I did want to pick one to talk about, just to get us all thinking, and it's good for me to reflect on it too. And it was akin to what both Mark and Luke talked about, is how do we continue to support our users with technology needs and solutions when our world changed so quickly and so dramatically. Expectations on us changed so quickly and dramatically as well. And our staff were dealing with trauma while they're being asked to help others in trauma. So for us, we were really fortunate that we had take home one-to-one for many years, financed through a bond, which was fantastic. So our grades 6-12 already had a device, and they had it at home. But we had about over 10,000 students who did not have a device at home. They were sitting wired up in carts. And if you've ever unwired a device from a cart, if you haven't, I would encourage you to do so, just to get to experience what that feels like. We did that about 10,000 times. And it was of things that could be fun, that was not on that list of mine. But we really quickly had to figure that one out. Our reality was that our organization came to us while we're trying to figure out how to train remote staff to teach and do their work from home, and said, you have 10,000 elementary students. We need them learning. They need a device. Devices are in schools. Thank you. And that was pretty much the conversation with senior leadership and me. They were the rest of my cabinet. Our cabinet was dealing with the pandemic in their own different ways and impacts. And so this came to me, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But so that was it really became, a two-step process. One, get devices for kids, and two, figure out how to support them remotely. And Mark talked about that as well. So for us, and this photo, I loved Luke's fire photo. My photo skills, you can see, are nowhere near Luke's. But this was taken, and the sky was that color at one of our fall distributions, because we had to continuously make sure that students were getting devices. And initially we deployed Chromebooks for elementaries. And in the fall, once it was apparent we weren't coming back, we got to do device distributions at 34 elementary schools within 5 days for a second time in a row, and to get them iPads for our youngest learners. But our challenges were really around three areas. One was kind of as I mentioned earlier, the organizational capacity. When the pandemic hit, the senior leadership of our school district, we didn't have the luxury anymore of getting together in a room and talking through things and developing a plan. It was reacting, and it was reacting to very quickly changing conditions. Staff very stressed, in places of stress, and we just didn't have the luxury of being able to lean on each other like we had in the past. It was more because we were so reactive, as I shared earlier. What came to me was, okay, you've got the technology, just make sure that works, let us know, right? And so that was a challenge for me in my role, was the way in which we reacted. Beaverton has had for many years a disaster recovery plan, a business continuity plan, a BCP. What was ironic is we we had the big red binders, we had practice tabletops, and in the middle of the pandemic, no one realized we were in a crisis and needed to activate our business continuity planning. And so that misstep caused us to stumble a little bit out the gate. The second challenge for us was really one of IT staff capacity. We have a great team, just like Mark and Luke and you, the teams that you are all on. We have a great team in Beaverton. And that team was being asked to do things that they'd never done before. Roll out VPN for 5,000 people in a day or two. Train everyone on a soft phone when most of our staff didn't know what a soft phone was. So the speed of which we had to react and the scope of which we had to react were magnified. At the very same time, our staff were dealing with personal issues related to being in a pandemic. And so there was a challenge in us making sure we're taking care of ourselves. And Tara spoke to this yesterday. Like, we have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. And that really is the last two, is that while our IT staff was in that situation, for me, I kept forgetting that I needed to take that time to be most effective. So instead, I would do fits and starts of driving myself into the ground. Probably you all did too. And then taking longer to recover. And so for me, personally, that challenge was something that I wanted to take some learning forward from, because I think that personally I could have been more effective had I not deployed that default, which was just go until you can't anymore, versus being a little bit more strategic and smart about taking care of yourselves so that we could take care of others. So for us, just like you all, we've been in this place for a year. And for us, as I mentioned, we were almost a one-to-one, but we were not one-to-one. And the bond funding did not fund us at one-to-one. So, but at the same time, just like Luke mentioned about free like a puppy, we got a bunch of devices really quickly, because that's what I said we needed. They said, what do you need? And I said, I need a ton of devices and a ton of connectivity. And so we got those devices. And so now we're in a one-to-one now what situation, because we aren't in a sustainable path. We're not funded at one-to-one. And so now we're having to figure out, what does it look like going forward? Do we stay one-to-one and try and bridge that gap? Or do we tell schools and teachers, okay, we're all coming back in the fall, so everything back in the carts, and all the fun we had unwiring a cart, we get to rewire. So that's kind of our thinking right now, is what are we going to do? What's fall going to look like with regards to students using technology? I mentioned business continuity planning. So next time we're going to do it for real, or we won't. But it's good to have plans. And as Mark mentioned, sometimes the best laid plans, right, just don't work out. And I think that this was a lesson for not just IT, but all of our leadership and all of our staff is, if we're going to go to the trouble of making a continuity plan and practicing the continuity plan, in a crisis, we should take the continuity plan off the shelf and actually use it versus just reacting in the ways we did. And then kind of for us, recognizing that staff are still in states of stress with regard to this, even though hopefully we're coming out, being more aware of where staff are so that we can be more effective, I think is a key thing to think about in the future. So in terms of, before we go to the room, in terms of some leadership lessons, one thing that really resonated with me was that checking in with others, right? So during that time of stress, taking extra time, and this isn't just for leaders, someone who has a leadership title. This is for all of us. We need to be checking in with each other. I spend as much time with my work colleagues as I do with my family. So we need to take that time, and that's the first thing to go, but something that's really, really critical. So, and knowing that our staff has to take care of others as well. And then something for the future is work needs to change. the way we work, the way we learn, we cannot go back to 1950s schooling, which is what we had in 2018 in many places. So that's just my opinion. You can disagree if you want, but we can't snap back to default, because default didn't serve everyone, and default wasn't our most productive workforce. So we've got to lean into new ways to work and learn. And so the way this looks like in Beaverton, I don't know if this is going to work or not. We've not been realizing that people could be productive at home, right? We've not been telework friendly. And over the last year, we've not only proven that they can be, we've proven we can be more effective. And so what we've done is sensing the organization wanted to snap back in IT, I started a future of work study. We took all of our IT staff in buildings and centrally, almost 80 of them, and we went through 5 questions in small groups of 5 to 6, where we could get everyone's feedback and people wouldn't fade to the back of the room, the virtual room. And we asked them what worked well over the last year, what didn't work well, what did you miss over the last year, how should work look different 2 years in the future for us to continue to provide the best service and technology solutions? And then finally, what was one word that summarized your work experience? So we got 80 people to give us their thinking. I'm taking that thinking to cabinet now, because cabinet, and I'm not throwing shade at my colleagues, they're lovely people, but we need to lean into work should look different. And I didn't want it just to be me saying we have to telecommute now, because that's going too low. It's not aiming high enough. So what we're going to do is, over the next week, I'm going to process this with cabinet and say, here's thinking from our IT professionals on how work and learning could be different in the future. And then we have to have the courage as an organization to do it. So I don't know if I'm going to be successful. I think I am. But I'd encourage you, if you're in an organization where you're snapping back, don't let it snap back. Like, take some steps. And, maybe it's as simple as getting together with people and talking about what the future of work and learning could look like. So, take that, if it works for you, great. If not, it was free. So that's kind of what we're doing. So with that, we asked at the beginning some essential questions for you to think about. And those are the 2. And Francisco says, can I ask those questions? Can I get those questions? Absolutely, Francisco, we will do that. I can share those with you. But if anyone wants to, I'm going to stop sharing my slides now. And I'd love for someone to raise their hand and come up on the stage and share kind of your experience is about how your reality was reset and what you think we should be learning. So with that, let me stop presenting. And does someone want to raise their hand so I can get them on the stage? Oh, Susan. Thank you, Susan. And I'm going to try and pin you. Let's see if that works. Luke is saying yes, please. There we go.
I can hang out with Luke. Hey, Luke.
Okay. Susan.
So just thinking off the last topic there of working remotely and trying to change the culture of work, where you go into a physical location to do that work and then you go home and you have a separation. We've all learned and seen that is possible to do remotely, especially when everybody is remote. I think the conversations in our environment, my district coming back in, is building the space to have that conversation. I think we snapped back, right? And then everybody was supposed to come back, and we got really hard about, you will show up on this day. You may not work at home any longer. And now we're stuck in this pretty hard spot between what employees who have been successful working at home, a lot of IT folks, right? And there's the equity issue around a custodian versus an IT specialist versus a secretary versus a teacher, right? We have a very unique business, but there are positions in our district that can work remotely and potentially could be efficient continuing to work remotely. Do you have any idea how you're going to host that conversation at cabinet and then over into the HR and union world to baby step folks through that conversation? Because that's a pretty big cultural shift. Anyway, that's my question for you all.
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to share the thinking. So in February, I started this with cabinet and said, we can't come back to what was. And again, lovely people down the hall, respect them all, different perspectives. And some people were just thinking like, well, we have to, right? Because to Susan's point, a bus driver can't drive a bus remotely. And I said, well, not yet. 5 years from now, maybe, but not yet, right? So don't constrain your mind. And so I bet you that made parents just freak out right now. Sorry about that. But what I said was, we don't treat people equally right now. So if you want to treat people equally, one job description, pay everyone the same, right? Let's do that. We need to acknowledge that we already treat people differently based on their roles, responsibilities, and skill sets that we demand from their position. So this idea that we could be effective working remotely is just another way we acknowledge that difference. I have had people say that they have been more effective because they can focus to degrees that they never could before. There's also some unhealthy aspects. As Susan said, if your work in your office is the same place, do you ever leave, or your work at home is same, do you ever leave work, right? So we have to be careful of that. But my strategy is not going to be, Steve believes this, therefore we got to do it. My strategy is going to say, I want to share with you the reflection from 80 people who have been immersed in this work, and you as an organization have said they have rocked it. So I want you to hear their thinking, right? So that's going to be the way I'm going to approach it. And my ask is that we create policies around it. So it's not just a free for all, the pandemic. We put some structure around it so that we can know that we are going to be successful. And if staff aren't successful, we've got supports for them. So that's kind of my strategy. I don't know if it's going to work. I'll let you know in a couple of weeks. If you see a job opening in Beaverton, you'll know it didn't work. So
I think it's a sign of many things, right? It's going to take lots of conversation, which is going to take some time. It's just a culture shift, whether we're talking about online learning or working remotely or all those things. So appreciate the feedback. Thanks for the insight into how you'll approach that. And I'll look for you on this side of the road with your sign.
I might be coming applying for a job. All right. Someone else, anybody else want to share their thinking? Just hit the raised hand button and we'll move you up on the stage. Otherwise, Luke is very lonely, although it's lovely looking at Luke.
I'm not sure how you pulled that off, Steve, that I'm the solo one with the full screen view at the moment. But
that is because I've got the host duties.
But it works because I will hold up a book. So I will just shout out Tony Earlbeck, if you know Tony. He pioneered remote work before this all went down. We kind of had to work through how to keep Tony in our department, even though he was going to be living a little far away to get in the office every day. And so I remember February, before the pandemic, I had a great conversation with Stuart Long at Integrated Ed, the OETC conference, about like, how in the world do we make this work? And he gave me some tips and pointers. And then we started this conversation with our HR department and got it all figured out and got Tony all set up on that. And then everyone realized how cool Tony was, and everyone else decided to go remote right after that as well. So well done, Tony, on that. But one of the things we did is a bunch of us in the department wrote a book called Remote. It's by some guys who have been under some controversy recently, so maybe I shouldn't be recommending this book, but the founders of 37 Signals made it. And it actually had some really good advice. And then, we were able to take some things we were already doing as a department. We had a really lively Slack channel, which is going right now on my screen. And that allowed us to be in kind of constant communication anyway. And then we're doing some weekly meetings to kind of check in with everyone and make sure everything's going well. But yeah, as Jamie just said in the chat, Tony working in another time zone has actually worked out great for us. Like we have someone who is answering emails at 5 or 6 in the morning. And with Jamie's schedule, it means that we really have almost no gap whatsoever in our IT staff on duty. So Jamie's a night owl and usually does that morning high five with Tony to hand things off. So we have a great small team that covers all hours of the day. The time zone thing's been cool actually.
Hey, Steve, I saw that comment in there from Sarah Lawrence up at North Shore about equity versus equality. Yeah. And, that's one of the biggest things in any decision that you're looking at. So we have an equity plan, and with that equity plan, we have a flow chart. And if it doesn't support equity, we try not to do it. So it's important to make sure that you are cognizant that not everybody is going to be treated the same. It comes back to making sure that you're approaching the perspective of making sure that it is equity at the core.
Absolutely.
It takes time.
Yeah. And Derek, I saw your comment in there about the unions and associations. One of the things we're going to try and accomplish with this policy that is already starting to get built is just the acknowledgement that it is dependent upon position. And so we've got to be able to move away from the idea that because you're an association and because our largest groups in the association are professionals that unfortunately it's more challenging for them to work remotely, as I mentioned, our bus driver colleagues. But we've got to move away from that. So that's one way that we're trying to do that, by saying that we're not going to make it by job classification. We're going to try and make it very broad and say that, we're going to look at positions and craft some flexibility. So that's the hope. And it looks like Melissa is saying that Luke is looking at Slack. So thank you, Melissa, for helping Luke stay connected.
Thank you, Melissa.
Anybody else have some ideas, want to raise your hand, want to come up to the stage? It's not scary up here. You're all lovely people. And we really do want to make some time to hear the expertise in the room. Oh, we got a hand raised. All right, so I'm going to hand the mic. Oh, now we got lots of hands raised. Okay, we're going to start with Sarah and then go to Max and then Irvin. Okay, I'm going to take, let me pin you.
I got to go. I lost my train of thought for a minute, so give me a second. Now that I'm on the stage. I'm wearing my ACPE sweatshirt today.
Right on.
It was easy, made it easy to get dressed. What was I going to say? Oh, I appreciated, Steve, your comments and focus on kind of taking care of the people that are taking care of the people. I found, one of the challenges that I really struggled with was taking care of my tech support team. And the expectations that were coming down from, executive leadership for how responsive we were and all of the things we were expected to implement in that short period of time, and balancing that with my team was dealing with COVID and their own fears and all of our own internal, changes in practice. We're supporting people while we're off the network, and we don't have all of our regular tools. So it was definitely, I found it really challenging to kind of balance all of the expectations. And it felt like, in the moment I'm hearing like, you can't stop working. You can't take time to take care of yourself. we have got to get these things going for teachers and students, and that's important. And we're not going to be able to balancing that with, we can't sustain that if we're not taking care of ourselves.
That is so true, Sarah. And I think you and Shelby did a session on that yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it was very much around our cyber response, but man, did that prepare us for COVID.
Right. And so everyone, we do have recordings that are going to get posted. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to Sarah and Shelby's session. It was very good. I got to listen to pieces of it, but that's why we have recordings. So thank you, Sarah. I'm going to let you hop off the stage, and we're going to bring Max up.
All right.
All right, Max.
Trying here. Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, I'm trying to find the little camera there.
There we go. We see you too, my friend. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too, Steve. I just kind of want to go in here for a second and a little bit short. Steve, one thing that pointed out to me when you were saying there is how you involved your entire IT staff and getting feedback from them prior to talking to leadership. In my districts, our IT team is a little bit smaller than Beaverton. But so what's something that really helped in the conversation with the district leadership here was simply to involve them. Now, when the pandemic hit and we were asked to do everything in IT, we also had a few people that were wondering what they were going to do. So actually, one of the people that really helped me with this conversation was our AD in our high school, because suddenly he didn't have sports, but he was really great at taking apart carts and doing those kind of things. And so a lot of the feedback that were brought in was actually not from IT staff, but from people that had untraditional roles that suddenly were roped into some IT work, to giving out devices, checking out machines, and doing some of those things. So that feedback has really been helpful in the conversation in our district, just to kind of see where do we go from here. Because I think the agreement is clear that we can't go back to where we were, but how do we involve everyone? Really, the conversation, the strongest voices have really been from beyond IT. So just a thought from
Awesome. Hey, thanks very much, Max. That's absolutely so true. So that's another way realities were reset, because people were doing things that were not in their job description, right? Job descriptions got thrown out the window for last March. So I appreciate that. Good. All right, I'm going to let you hop off and bring on Irvin, and then Irvin will let you kind of share some thoughts, and then we're going to close so you can all get your lunch and join us for our lunch session.
Okay, I'll turn on camera here.
Here.
I was so glad to see that Derek weighed in, because I was watching this and I really appreciate your comments, Steve, about the work from home. I was going to, I'm recording the session. I was going to make sure Derek saw that. I understand. I sit at an interesting intersection as someone who works on things and has worked from home since March, pretty much. But I'm also on the bargaining team for the classified employees. So I understand the pressure. I think what's happening right now is certain large constituent groups of our union have been feeling way oppressed by things the district's done, reassigning them to things. And they are the largest group in the union. And so the union is hearing a lot of angry people. And I think once we get through things settling down, that should ease some, because technology is not like the other departments. There are many jobs. I know some of the help desk things that we found people with hidden background and skills in help desk that work great remotely, and so that we have a lot of success stories to share. But I'm not sure that not just the union but the district are quite ready to hear it until things settle down a little bit. But I'm hopeful, and I appreciate Derek taking up the cause. And Steve, I don't think he'll be staying on the side of the road, but you never know on some districts. So that's my comments.
Thanks very much, Irvin. I'm going to just put up our final screen just as a saying thank you, or maybe I won't. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. All right. So this has been a time that we've talked about some examples and shared with you. And thanks for everyone who's shared about how our realities are reset during the pandemic. It's really important not to, like I said, or like we said, to snap back, but rather to learn forward. So we've got to reimagine instead of resisting the urge just to get back. And with that, I would say that you all have had your realities reset in one way or the other. But now I think it's time to reset our realities, right? So we've, in so many ways, changed so quickly and done so well, providing supports to staff and students when they need it. Our learning should be, how do we continue to do that in new ways? So with that, thank you, Luke and Mark, for sharing your thoughts. And thank you all in the room for sharing your thoughts. I can't wait till we're together next year in person, but this did feel like, it reminded me of that time in the room together where we're just all brainstorming and learning from each other. So with that, thanks very much, everyone. And please do grab your lunch and join us at lunch at 12:30. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.